The massive diplomatic hall stretched before Princess Zara like a crystal cathedral. Its walls gleamed with the soft blue light that her people preferred, while warm yellow illumination marked the sections prepared for human guests. The Velthran Empire had spent months preparing for this moment, the first official peace talks between their species and humanity in over 3 decades. Zara stood beside the ornate throne where her father, Emperor Kent, would soon take his place. Her crystalline blue skin caught the ceremonial lights, creating patterns that shifted with her breathing. The traditional royal robes felt heavier today, weighted with the importance of what was about to happen. Around her, the Velthran Council members moved with practiced grace, their own skin tones ranging from deep sapphire to pale ice blue. "Remember, daughter," her father had told her that morning, "today we decide whether humans can truly be trusted. Your observations will guide our choices." Zara nodded to herself, adjusting the translation device at her throat. She had studied human languages extensively, much more than most of her people knew. The princess spoke 7 human dialects fluently, but protocol demanded the use of universal translators during official meetings. The great doors at the far end of the hall began to open with a low, melodic tone. Zara straightened, composing her expression into the neutral mask expected of Velthran royalty. The human delegation would enter now, and everything would change. The first human through the doors was clearly their leader, tall, confident, wearing the formal black and gold uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Ambassador Chen walked with measured steps, her dark hair pulled back severely, her face showing the careful composure of someone who understood the weight of history. Behind her came other officials, military advisors in deep blue uniforms, trade specialists in practical gray, and cultural attaches wearing the colorful formal wear of Earth's many nations. Zara studied each face, noting the diversity of human features that still fascinated her people. Some humans were pale, others dark, with hair ranging from yellow to black to every shade between. Then she saw him. Among the technical staff walking at the rear of the group, wearing the simple brown uniform of a maintenance engineer, was a man with graying hair and kind eyes. His hands bore the calluses of someone who worked with tools and machinery. His face had aged, lined now with years and experience, but there was no mistaking those gentle features. Zara's breath caught in her throat. Her carefully maintained royal composure wavered as memories came flooding back like a tide she could not stop. Ben. The human delegation arranged themselves in the designated area, following the precise formations that had been agreed upon weeks ago. Ambassador Chen stepped forward to begin the formal introductions, but Zara heard none of the words. Her entire focus had narrowed to the quiet man standing with the technical team, his eyes scanning the hall with professional interest. "Princess Zara," her father's voice cut through her thoughts. "You are needed for the formal greetings." She forced herself to move forward, each step feeling strange and unreal. This was supposed to be a day of careful diplomacy, of measured words and calculated responses. Instead, her world had tilted on its axis because of one familiar face in an unfamiliar place. The formal introductions began as planned. Ambassador Chen spoke the traditional words of greeting, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. Emperor Kent responded with equal formality, welcoming the human delegation to Velthran space. The words washed over Zara like distant music while she struggled to process what was happening. When the Emperor introduced his daughter, Zara stepped forward as she had been trained since childhood. She spoke the proper phrases, welcomed the humans with appropriate dignity, and managed to keep her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Then Ambassador Chen began introducing the members of her delegation. Our military advisor, General Park. Our trade specialist, Minister Williams. Our cultural attaché, Professor Smith. The list continued, each human stepping forward briefly as their name was called. Zara acknowledged each one with a small nod, her training taking over while her thoughts raced. And our technical support team, Chen continued, led by Chief Engineer Roberts and including Maintenance Specialist Ben Miller. There it was. The name that had echoed in her memory for 15 years. Ben Miller. When he stepped forward with the rest of the technical team, his movements were the same unhurried, careful motions she remembered. He offered a brief, respectful bow to the Velthran leadership, his eyes meeting Zara's for just a moment. In that instant, she saw recognition beginning to dawn in his expression. His brow furrowed slightly, the way it used to when he was thinking through a difficult problem. But then the moment passed, and he stepped back with his colleagues. The formal ceremonies continued for another hour. Trade agreements were discussed in broad terms. Cultural exchange programs were proposed. Military leaders from both sides outlined security arrangements for the ongoing talks. Zara participated where required, but her mind kept drifting to the human engineer who stood quietly with his team. Could it really be him? She had been so much smaller then, barely reaching his knee. Her appearance had changed dramatically as she grew from a young child into an adult. It was possible he did not recognize her at all. But she knew him. Even after 15 years, even with gray in his hair and new lines around his eyes, she would know that face anywhere. Those were the same hands that had bandaged her injuries and offered her food when she was afraid to take it. Those were the same gentle eyes that had looked at her with kindness instead of fear. When the formal session finally ended, both delegations were escorted to their respective quarters. Protocol demanded that the two groups remain separate during the preliminary discussions, meeting only for scheduled negotiations and formal meals. Zara watched the humans file out of the hall, her heart racing as Ben disappeared through the doorway. "You seem distracted, daughter," Emperor Kent observed as they made their way to the royal chambers. "Do the humans concern you?" "Not concern, father. I find them interesting." "Interesting how?" "Their leader seems competent, though their customs remain strange to me. That business of shaking hands rather than the proper touching of foreheads, very odd." Zara nodded absently. Her father was a good ruler, but he had never spent time with humans the way she had. To him, they were still mysterious aliens whose intentions needed to be carefully evaluated. He could not understand the complexity of human emotion, the way their faces showed their thoughts so clearly, or the warmth that could exist in their simple gestures. "I would like to review their cultural files," she said. "To better understand their negotiating style." Wise thinking. Knowledge of their customs will serve us well in the talks. The Emperor moved on to discuss other matters, but Zara found herself unable to concentrate. Every conversation seemed to drag on endlessly when all she could think about was the human engineer somewhere in the station's guest quarters. That evening, as the Velthran delegation gathered for their traditional meal, Zara excused herself early. She claimed fatigue from the day's events, which was not entirely untrue. The emotional shock of seeing Ben had left her drained and restless at the same time. In the privacy of her chambers, she activated her personal computer and pulled up the files on the human delegation. The basic information was all there: Ambassador Chen's distinguished career, General Park's military record, the various qualifications of the trade and cultural specialists. She found Ben Miller's file near the end of the technical team listings. The information was sparse compared to the senior diplomats, but it told a story she found both familiar and surprising. Born on Earth in the year 2387, assigned to various mining and research stations throughout his career. Specialization in life support systems and emergency repairs. Commendations for service during several crisis situations where his quick thinking had saved lives. Currently assigned to Maintenance Division 12 aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony. The file mentioned his service at Asteroid Station 7 between 2398 and 2401. Zara stared at those dates, calculating quickly. She had been rescued in 2399, when she was only 6 years old by human standards. The timing was perfect. But the file said nothing about a crashed alien escape pod or a frightened Velthran child. Of course it would not. Such an incident would have been classified at the highest levels, if it had been officially reported at all. Zara leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as the memories came flooding back with painful clarity. The terrifying sound of weapons fire. The way her escape pod had shaken and spun before crashing into the asteroid's surface. Waking up alone and hurt, surrounded by the twisted metal of her ruined craft. Then footsteps approaching, and her fear that the pirates had found her. But instead of rough voices and cruel laughter, she had heard a gentle human voice speaking words she did not understand. When she finally looked up, she saw Ben kneeling beside the wreckage, his face full of concern rather than threat. He had been younger then, his hair still brown instead of gray, but his eyes had held the same kindness she had seen today in the diplomatic hall. While other humans might have contacted authorities immediately or treated her as some exotic curiosity, Ben had simply seen a hurt child who needed help. The memory of those 3 days still burned bright in her mind. Ben bringing her water and soft foods that would not upset her alien digestive system. Ben sitting with her when nightmares made her cry out in her sleep. Ben teaching her simple human words and showing her pictures of Earth while they waited for her people to find her. Most importantly, Ben protecting her from the few humans who had wanted to study her or turn her over to military officials. His quiet insistence that she was just a scared kid who deserved to be treated with respect had shaped everything that came after. When the Velthran rescue ships finally arrived, Ben had helped her understand what was happening. He had made sure she was not frightened of the medical procedures or confused by the official questioning. Even as she was being taken away to safety, she had looked back to see him standing at the viewing port, watching to make sure she was truly all right. That experience had changed everything for Zara. Before the crash, humans had been abstract beings to her, aliens that her people sometimes encountered in space but rarely interacted with directly. The few stories she had heard painted them as unpredictable and potentially dangerous. But Ben had shown her a different truth. Humans could be kind without expecting reward. They could be gentle with creatures smaller and weaker than themselves. They could make decisions based on compassion rather than fear or greed. In the years that followed, Zara had studied human culture extensively, driven by a desire to understand the species that had produced someone like Ben. She had learned their languages, read their literature, watched their entertainment broadcasts whenever possible. Her unusual interest in human affairs had eventually led to her appointment as cultural advisor for these very negotiations. And now, by some impossible coincidence, the man who had started her on this path was here. Part of the human delegation, wearing a simple maintenance uniform, probably unaware that the alien princess he was helping to negotiate with was the same frightened child he had rescued years ago. Zara stood up and moved to her window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. Tomorrow would bring the first real negotiating session, where both sides would begin discussing the practical details of peaceful coexistence. It would be careful, formal, limited by protocol and diplomatic necessity. But tonight, she found herself making a decision that had nothing to do with royal duty or diplomatic strategy. She needed to speak with Ben Miller. She needed to know if he remembered those 3 days on Asteroid Station 7. And perhaps, if she was very careful about it, she could arrange for that conversation to happen. The thought of breaking protocol made her nervous, but not nearly as nervous as the possibility of letting this chance slip away. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, a princess would find a way to thank the man who had taught her that humans were capable of extraordinary kindness. Princess Zara waited until the late hours of the station's night cycle before making her move. The diplomatic quarters were designed with separate sections for each delegation, but the central botanical garden served as neutral ground where both species could walk freely. According to the station's schedule, the garden would be nearly empty at this hour. She had changed from her formal royal robes into simple civilian clothing, a flowing blue tunic and practical pants that would not immediately identify her as Velthran royalty. The princess even left her ceremonial jewelry behind, keeping only the small translation device that looked like an ordinary communication badge. The walk to the botanical garden took 15 minutes through corridors lined with soft lighting. Zara passed only a few maintenance workers and security personnel, none of whom paid special attention to another Velthran moving through the station. Her heart beat faster with each step, uncertainty growing alongside her determination. What if Ben did not remember her at all? What if he remembered but preferred to keep the past buried? What if approaching him caused diplomatic complications that could harm the peace talks? These worries faded when she entered the garden and saw him there. Ben sat on a simple bench beneath a cluster of earth trees that had been planted to help the human delegation feel more comfortable. He was reading something on a small tablet, his face lit by its gentle glow. The sight of him in peaceful surroundings brought back a flood of memories from those 3 days on Asteroid Station 7. Zara approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the garden's walking paths. When she was still several meters away, Ben looked up from his reading. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized her, and he started to stand. "Princess Zara," he said, offering a respectful bow. "I did not expect to see anyone else here so late." "Please, sit," she replied, gesturing to the bench. "I was hoping I might find you here." Ben's expression showed confusion, but he settled back onto the bench as she approached. "You were looking for me specifically?" "I am sorry, but I think there might be some mistake. I am just a maintenance engineer. If you need assistance with something technical, I should probably connect you with Ambassador Chen or one of the senior staff." Zara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. This moment had been 15 years in the making, and she needed to find the right words. "There is no mistake, Ben Miller. May I sit with you?" The use of his full name clearly surprised him. Ben nodded toward the other end of the bench, his brow furrowing in the same way she remembered from childhood. "Of course, Princess. But I am confused about how you know my name." The introductions today were quite formal. Instead of sitting immediately, Zara stood before him and spoke a single sentence in perfect, unaccented English. "Thank you for the soup. It was warm and good." The tablet slipped from Ben's hands and clattered onto the bench. His face went completely still for a moment, then filled with an expression of wonder and disbelief. "No," he whispered, switching to English himself. "That is not possible. She was so small, just a little child. And that was 15 years ago." 16 years by your calendar," Zara corrected gently, also speaking in English now. "I was 6 years old when my escape pod crashed on Asteroid Station 7. You found me hiding in the wreckage, scared and hurt and alone." Ben stared at her, his eyes searching her face for traces of the child he had once known. "You cannot be her. That little girl had such big eyes, and she was barely tall enough to reach my knee. She was so frightened of everything." "I was frightened," Zara agreed, finally settling onto the bench beside him. "But not of you. Never of you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a tiny metal figure of a dog that showed signs of wear from years of handling. "You gave this to me on the second day, when I was crying because I missed my parents. You said it was called a puppy, and that Earth children played with toys like this when they felt sad." Ben's hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the little figure. "I remember that. It was from my personal kit, something my sister had given me years before. You held on to it so tightly." "I have carried it with me ever since," Zara said softly. "It reminded me that there were good people in the universe, even when everything seemed dark and frightening." For several long moments, they sat in silence while Ben processed this revelation. His eyes moved from the toy dog to her face, clearly seeing the child she had been and the adult she had become. "I cannot believe it," he said finally. "Little Zara. You were so brave, even when you were scared. And now look at you, a princess, representing your entire people in these talks." "I became who I am partly because of you," she told him. "What you did for me, how you treated me, changed everything about how I understood humans." Ben shook his head, still looking stunned. "I did not do anything special. You were hurt and afraid, and I helped. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No, Ben. Not anyone." Zara turned to face him more directly. "Do you remember what some of the other humans wanted to do?" His expression darkened slightly. "Supervisor Harris wanted to contact the military immediately. He thought you might be some kind of weapon or spy. And Dr. Reed from the medical bay kept talking about the scientific value of studying an alien child. But you stopped them. I told them you were just a scared kid who needed help, not a specimen to be examined. It was not difficult to see that you were frightened and in pain. Making that worse would have been cruel. Zara smiled, remembering his quiet determination in protecting her. You told Supervisor Harris that anyone who wanted to treat a child badly would have to go through you first. Even though he outranked you, even though you could have gotten in serious trouble. You remember that conversation? I understood more English than I let on, even then. I was pretending to sleep, but I heard everything. You risked your job to keep me safe. Ben was quiet for a moment, his hands fidgeting with the tablet he had set aside. I just could not stand the idea of anyone hurting you. You were so small, and you had already been through such a terrible experience with your ship being attacked. Tell me what you remember about those days, Zara requested. I would like to hear your perspective. Ben leaned back against the bench, his eyes distant as he recalled events from years past. The first day was the hardest. You were injured, cuts and bruises from the crash, and you would not let anyone near you except me. I think it was because I approached slowly and kept my voice calm. Dr. Reed wanted to sedate you for treatment, but I convinced him to let me try talking to you first. You sang to me, Zara remembered. A human song about sunshine and rain. My mother used to sing that when I was sick as a child. I thought it might be comforting, even if you could not understand the words. Music seems to cross language barriers sometimes. It worked. That was when I first felt safe enough to let you clean my injuries. Ben nodded, warming to the memory. You were so curious about everything, once you stopped being afraid. You wanted to know the names for every object in my quarters. I spent hours teaching you basic words: water, food, sleep, safe. You showed me pictures of Earth on your computer, Zara added. Oceans and mountains and cities. It was the first time I realized that humans had a beautiful home world, not just ships and stations. I wanted you to understand that we were not all like the pirates who attacked your transport. Most humans are peaceful people who just want to live their lives and take care of their families. That simple statement captured exactly why those 3 days had been so important to Zara. Ben had not just rescued her physically, he had rescued her understanding of what humanity could be. On the 3rd day, when my people came to take me home, you made sure I understood what was happening, she continued. You walked me through every step so I would not be frightened of the medical scans or the formal interviews. You were crying when it was time to leave, Ben remembered. Not because you were scared, but because you did not want to say goodbye. That broke my heart a little. I wanted to stay with you, Zara admitted. In my child's mind, I thought maybe you could come live with my family on our home world. I did not understand then how different our societies were. Ben smiled sadly. I wanted to make sure you would be all right. Your people seemed kind enough, but they were very formal and official. I worried that you might get lost in all the protocols and procedures. I was not lost. But I was changed. Zara paused, choosing her words carefully. Before I met you, humans were just stories to me. Dangerous aliens who might attack our ships or compete for resources. After those 3 days, I knew that was not the whole truth. What happened when you went home? I started studying everything I could about human culture. Languages, history, art, science. My parents thought it was just a child's fascination that would fade, but it never did. The more I learned, the more I wanted to understand your people. Ben looked amazed. All because of 3 days on a mining station. All because someone showed me kindness when I needed it most, she corrected. You could have been afraid of me, or seen me as a burden, or just done the minimum required to keep me alive. Instead, you treated me like I mattered. Like my fear and pain were important. Like I was worth protecting. You were worth protecting. Any child would be. That is what makes you special, Ben. You see a child first, not an alien. You see a person in need, not a political problem. That perspective is rare. They sat quietly for a while, both lost in memories and the strangeness of this reunion. Finally, Ben spoke again. I followed the news reports about you over the years, he admitted. When your people first announced that a member of the royal family was studying human culture, I wondered if it might be you. But it seemed impossible that the little girl I knew could grow up to become so important. I am still the same person you helped, Zara assured him. I still carry your toy dog. I still remember the songs you sang. And I still believe that humans and Velthrans can be friends because you showed me it was possible. Ben shook his head in wonder. I had no idea that helping one frightened child could lead to something this significant. That is the power of kindness, Zara said. You cannot always see where it will lead, but it creates ripples that spread far beyond the original act. Is that why you became involved in these negotiations? Ben asked. Because of what happened between us? Partly, yes. I spent years convincing my father and the council that humans were worth talking to, worth trusting. Every time they expressed doubts, I would tell them stories about the human who saved me. About your patience and gentleness and courage. Ben looked embarrassed by this praise. I was just doing what felt right. And that is exactly what convinced them. If doing what felt right led you to protect an alien child, then perhaps humans could be trusted to do what felt right in larger matters too. Did it work? Do your people trust us now? Zara smiled. They trust us enough to be here, having these talks. That is progress. And what happens now? Ben asked. The negotiations start tomorrow, and I will be here for the next several weeks. This feels like such an impossible coincidence. Maybe it is not coincidence, Zara suggested. Maybe it is the universe giving us a chance to finish what we started 15 years ago. What do you mean? You saved one Velthran child. Now perhaps together we can save the future for both our peoples. The next morning brought the first formal negotiating session, and tensions filled the air like static electricity. Princess Zara took her place at the curved Velthran delegation table, while Ben sat with the human technical team several rows back. Neither gave any sign of their midnight conversation, but both felt the weight of shared knowledge as Ambassador Chen called the session to order. Today we begin discussions on the primary issue of territorial boundaries in the contested systems, Chen announced. Both our peoples have legitimate claims to mining rights in the Kepler 442 region. Emperor Kentha's advisor, Minister Vex, immediately raised an objection. The Velthran Empire established research stations in those systems over 40 years ago. Human expansion into the area represents an encroachment on our established territory. General Park responded firmly. Those systems were first charted by human exploratory vessels in 2387. Our people have been working those asteroid fields for decades. Zara watched the familiar pattern unfold, each side presenting their evidence, each dismissing the other's claims, neither willing to find middle ground. The same arguments that had prevented progress for 30 years were being repeated word for word. Perhaps we could establish a joint commission to review historical records, suggested Dr. Morgan, the human cultural specialist. Our records are clear and complete, Minister Vex replied coldly. We see no need for review by outsiders. Then how do you propose we resolve this dispute? Ambassador Chen asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. The humans should withdraw from systems we have already claimed. This is the only acceptable solution. General Park's jaw tightened. That is completely unreasonable. We have invested billions of credits and decades of work in those facilities. As the arguments continued, Zara felt her heart sinking. This was exactly what she had feared, two sides talking past each other, each convinced they were completely right, neither willing to consider the other's perspective. At this rate, the talks would collapse within days. She glanced back toward Ben, who was listening intently while making notes on his tablet. Even from a distance, she could see the same thoughtful expression he had worn years ago when trying to solve problems on the mining station. The morning session ended with no progress. Both delegations returned to their quarters for lunch and private consultations. Emperor Kent was clearly frustrated with the lack of movement, while the human leadership looked equally discouraged. The humans seem reasonable enough individually, the Emperor told his council, but they refuse to acknowledge our legitimate territorial claims. Perhaps they simply do not understand our legal traditions, suggested Minister Vex. Their approach to property rights is very different from ours. Or perhaps, Zara said carefully, we are all approaching this incorrectly. Her father looked at her with interest. What do you mean, daughter? We are arguing about who has the right to claim these systems, but we are not discussing what we actually need from them. The humans want mining access. We want research facilities. Those two goals do not necessarily conflict. You suggest some form of shared usage? Minister Vex looked skeptical. How could such an arrangement be managed fairly? I am not sure yet, Zara admitted. But I think we need to understand their practical needs better before we can find a workable solution. That afternoon's session began with more of the same territorial arguments. Zara found herself watching Ben again as he quietly observed the proceedings. Unlike the senior diplomats who spoke in grand terms about historical precedent and legal principles, Ben was making detailed notes about resource extraction methods and facility requirements. During a brief recess, she managed to catch his eye and give him the smallest of nods toward the door. He understood immediately and excused himself from his colleagues. They met in a small conference room that had been set aside for informal discussions. Ben looked concerned as he closed the door behind them. The talks are not going well, he observed. No, they are not, Zara agreed. Both sides are so focused on being right that they cannot see possible solutions. What did you want to discuss? Zara pulled out her tablet and showed him the territorial maps that had been presented that morning. Look at these mining claims your people have made. What do you actually need from these locations? Ben studied the display carefully, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the technical requirements. Most of these are asteroid mining operations. We need access to the rare earth elements for our technology manufacturing. The main requirements are stable orbital platforms for the processing equipment and clear shipping lanes for transport vessels. And what about these research stations my people have established? Zara highlighted the Velthran facilities on the same map. Those look like deep space observatories. Very sophisticated equipment for studying cosmic phenomena. They would need gravitationally stable positions and minimal interference from mining activities. As Ben spoke, Zara began to see something that the senior diplomats had missed. Ben, look at the actual locations. Your mining operations are focused on the asteroid belts, while our research stations are positioned at the Lagrange points between planets. Ben examined the map more closely, then his eyes widened with understanding. They are in completely different areas. The mining activities would not interfere with the research stations at all, as long as the shipping routes were planned properly. Exactly. We are arguing over territory when we should be discussing coordination. But why has no one else seen this? Because the diplomats are thinking in terms of political boundaries, not practical operations, Zara explained. They see overlapping territorial claims and assume conflict is inevitable. Ben was quiet for a moment, studying the maps with growing excitement. This could actually work better than separate operations. Your research stations would benefit from having nearby facilities for supplies and emergency support. Our mining operations would benefit from the advanced communications arrays your people have installed. You think they could be mutually beneficial? More than that, Ben said, warming to the idea. I think they could be the foundation for something much bigger. What do you mean? Ben moved to the room's main display screen and began sketching a rough diagram. What if we stopped thinking about these as separate human and Velthran operations? What if we designed them as integrated facilities from the beginning? He drew interconnected stations with shared infrastructure. Joint research and mining stations. Velthran scientists working alongside human engineers. Shared transportation networks and emergency response systems. Built together, operated together, benefiting both peoples. Zara stared at the diagram, her mind racing with possibilities. It would require unprecedented cooperation between our species. Yes, but think about the advantages. Your people have advanced research technology we could learn from. We have industrial techniques that could support much larger research projects than your current stations can handle. Together, we could accomplish things neither species could do alone. The councils would never approve such a radical change to the proposal, Zara said, though her voice carried hope rather than despair. Maybe they would, if it were presented properly, Ben suggested. Not as a compromise where both sides give up something, but as an opportunity for both sides to gain something better. How would you present it? Ben thought for a moment, then smiled. The same way I convinced Supervisor Harris to let me take care of you instead of calling the military. Show them the practical benefits and let them see that cooperation works better than conflict. You want to demonstrate the concept somehow? Why not? We have engineering teams from both species right here on the station. What if we work together on a small project? Something that shows how human and Velthran techniques could complement each other. Zara felt a familiar stirring of excitement, the same feeling she had experienced as a child when Ben had shown her pictures of Earth. What kind of project? The station's hydroponics bay has been having efficiency problems, Ben said. I noticed it in the technical reports. The current system can grow food for the human delegation, but it struggles with the mineral requirements for Velthran nutrition. I remember reading about that issue in the preparation materials. Your people have advanced mineral synthesis technology that could solve the problem completely. Our people have agricultural techniques that could increase yield significantly. If we combined both approaches, we could create a hydroponic system that works better for everyone. And you think the councils would allow this? It is just a small technical improvement to the station facilities, Ben said with a grin. Hardly worth bothering the senior diplomats about. But when they see the results, they will understand what bigger cooperation could accomplish. Zara found herself smiling back. You still think like an engineer first, do not you? Find the practical solution and worry about the politics later. It worked 15 years ago. That evening, while the senior diplomats attended formal dinner events, Zara and Ben quietly assembled a small team of volunteers. 3 Velthran technicians who were curious about human methods joined with 4 human engineers who wanted to learn about alien technology. The project began that very night in the station's hydroponics bay. Ben had been right about the problems. The current system was barely adequate for human needs and completely inadequate for the complex mineral requirements of Velthran physiology. Our people grow food in mineral-rich solutions that are precisely calibrated for our biology, explained Tika, one of the Velthran technicians. But your soil-based systems do not have the flexibility to adjust mineral content quickly. And our automated systems can handle much larger volumes than your current setup, added Sarah, a human agricultural specialist. But we have never worked with the complex chemistry your people require. What if we combined both approaches? Ben suggested. Use the Velthran mineral synthesis technology to create custom nutrient solutions, then feed those into an expanded version of our automated growing systems. The work continued for 3 days, with both teams learning from each other as they rebuilt the hydroponics bay from the ground up. Velthran precision instruments were integrated with human automation technology. Advanced Velthran chemistry was combined with efficient human production methods. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The new system could produce food suitable for both species at nearly twice the volume of the original setup, while using less energy and requiring less maintenance. Word of the project spread quickly through both delegations. By the 4th day, senior officials from both sides were visiting the hydroponics bay to see what their technical teams had accomplished. This is remarkable, Ambassador Chen admitted as Sarah demonstrated the new growing systems. I had no idea such integration was possible. Emperor Kent examined the Velthran mineral synthesizers that had been seamlessly incorporated into human machinery. The efficiency gains are impressive. Both technologies work better together than either would alone. That was exactly our experience, Ben said. When we stopped thinking about them as human technology and Velthran technology, and started thinking about them as just the best available tools for the job, everything became simpler. And this same principle could apply to larger projects, asked Minister Vex. Absolutely, Tika replied. The mining operations we have been arguing about could benefit tremendously from this kind of cooperation. Human industrial capacity combined with Velthran precision science could create facilities neither of us could build separately. Ambassador Chen looked thoughtful. This changes the entire framework of our negotiations. How so? The Emperor asked. We have been approaching these talks as if cooperation required sacrifice from both sides, Chen explained. But what if cooperation actually benefits both sides more than separate development would? Ben stepped forward, his voice quiet but confident. Your Majesty, Ambassador Chen, what if we stopped arguing about who gets to claim these systems and started planning how we can build something better there together? He activated the display screen and showed the integrated station design he had sketched earlier, now refined with input from both technical teams. Joint facilities that serve both our peoples. Shared infrastructure that reduces costs for everyone. Collaborative research that advances both our sciences. You are suggesting permanent integration of our operations? Minister Vex looked uncertain. I am suggesting we try building something together and see how well it works, Ben replied. Just like we did with the hydroponics bay. Start small, prove the concept, then expand based on what we learn. Zara watched her father and Ambassador Chen exchange looks. She could see them beginning to consider possibilities they had never imagined before. This would require a completely different approach to the negotiations, her father said slowly. Yes, it would, Ambassador Chen agreed. Instead of dividing territory, we would be planning joint development. Instead of protecting separate interests, we would be creating shared benefits. And instead of seeing each other as competitors, Zara added, we would be working as partners. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. My daughter, you have given us much to consider. Perhaps it is time to approach these talks with fresh thinking. I believe both our peoples would benefit from such an approach, Ambassador Chen said. Shall we schedule new sessions to explore these joint development possibilities? Yes, Emperor Kent replied. Let us see what we can build together. As the groups dispersed to prepare for the new negotiations, Zara found herself walking beside Ben toward the botanical garden where they had first recognized each other. You did it again, she said softly. Did what? Saw past the complicated politics to find a simple solution that helps everyone. Ben shook his head. We did it. I never could have understood Velthran needs well enough to make this work. And I never could have designed practical integration without your engineering perspective. So what happens now? Ben asked as they reached the garden. Zara looked up at the stars visible through the transparent dome above them. Now we find out whether two different species can really learn to work together. But I think we can. Because of a hydroponics bay? Because 15 years ago, a human showed an alien child that kindness and cooperation were possible, she replied. And today, that same human helped show two entire civilizations that they could build something better together than either could create alone. Ben smiled, the same gentle expression she remembered from her childhood. I still say I was just doing what felt right. And that, Zara said, is exactly why it worked. 3 months later, the first joint human Velthran research and mining facility began construction at the Kepler 442 Lagrange point. It was designed by teams from both species, built with integrated technology, and operated by crews who had learned to see each other as colleagues rather than aliens. The facility was named Harmony Station, in honor of the diplomatic vessel that had brought the two peoples together. But those who knew the real story called it something else, a monument to the power of simple human kindness and the way one small act of compassion could change the course of history. And in the station's memorial garden, next to a small earth tree that grew in Velthran soil, a bronze plaque told the story of an engineer named Ben and a princess named Zara, whose friendship had taught two civilizations how to reach for the stars together.